Breaking political news right now on MSNBC. The governor of Illinois arrested on hard-to-believe charges, including trying to sell or trade the Senate seat being vacated by President-elect Barack Obama.
The criminal case revolves around wiretapping and bugging devices, but there could also be a major political story as well as a new team takes on Washington. This is the New York Times Transition Edition on MSNBC.
This is a sad day for government. It's a very sad day for Illinois government. Governor Blagojevich has taken us to a truly new low.
Good day, everyone. I'm Tamryn Hall from MSNBC.
And I'm John Harwood with CNBC and the New York Times.
So I don't have to ask you. The big story, of course, is Chicago.
Tamryn, this is a jaw-dropping story. I've never seen anything like it in politics, and you're uniquely qualified as somebody who's worked a long time in Chicago. Let me ask you this question. You know Governor Blagojevich. Can you imagine him doing the things that were outlined in this complaint?
I can't answer whether I can imagine it, but I've interviewed Governor Blagojevich, as you know, John, many, many times. And I remember when he first ran to be the governor of Illinois, he ran against corruption. The current governor at the time, George Ryan, was involved in this complicated corruption trial. He ended up being convicted. And I remember Blagojevich being in the room saying that, that's nothing like me. I'll be nothing like that. But he had a very interesting personality. He had an infamous press conference, John, where he used the term testicular virility. He said that's what it takes to make tough decisions, and that kind of became a part of his persona. I even shared with John a story once where he would say, "Pass me the football," and that was what he called his comb, and he would kind of groom himself before his interviews, and he turned into somewhat of a character, but a character surrounded by allegations of corruption. And today we saw what happened in that press conference.
It's amazing. You read the details of that complaint, and Pat Fitzgerald said it was a new low, talked about all of the detail there. You just wonder what makes somebody like that tick.
Especially in Chicago, where this was a town that once had a store, the Al Capone souvenir store, and folks wanted it closed because they thought Chicago would always be associated with corruption, from politicians to criminals.
And he knew he was under investigation.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But let's get to the stunning news of the arrest of Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich and his chief of staff on federal corruption charges. The governor, of course, you have more details.
The governor and his chief of staff, John Harris, allegedly engaged in criminal activity, according to the FBI and U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald. Listen to this.
The most cynical behavior in all this, the most appalling, is the fact that Governor Blagojevich tried to sell the appointment to the Senate seat vacated by President-elect Obama. The conduct would make Lincoln roll over in his grave. The governor's own words describing this Senate seat, quote, "It's a bleeping valuable thing, you just don't give it away for nothing," close quote. Another quote, "I've got this thing, and it's bleeping golden, and I'm just not giving it up for bleeping nothing." It's a very sad day for Illinois government. Governor Blagojevich has taken us to a truly new low. Governor Blagojevich has been arrested in the middle of what we can only describe as a political corruption crime spree.
And that, of course, was U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald. John, he's called the new Elliot Ness when he first moved into Chicago, and maybe living up to that name. Take a look at what Governor Blagojevich is being charged with: conspiring to gain personal financial benefits by leveraging his authority to appoint a U.S. senator, take Barack Obama's seat, and trying to get members of the Chicago Tribune editorial board fired by withholding state help in the sale of Wrigley Field. And there is more, if you can believe. Blagojevich allegedly got campaign contributions in exchange for official actions. His phones were tapped at his home as well as his office, according to federal authorities. Let's talk to NBC's Savannah Guthrie, who is live in Chicago. And Savannah, many times during that press conference, Fitzgerald said that Obama has nothing to do with this. There's no allegation to imply the such. But what are we hearing from the transition team, if anything, on the reaction to what's happening here?
Well, as you know, Obama has this meeting with Al Gore scheduled for today, and there's a brief photo opportunity. And the last I heard is that there was a possibility that Obama might say something about what's gone on in Illinois today. I am sure the Obama transition aides are breathing a sigh of relief that Patrick Fitzgerald made a point at several different occasions to say that Obama, to this date, has not been swept up in this at all, except to the extent that it was his Senate seat the prosecutors allege Blagojevich was essentially trying to auction off, Tamryn.
Savannah, just think about what a postscript this is to the politics of hope that Barack Obama ran on. Now you've got these allegations swirling around the appointment of someone to succeed him. What do you suppose this does in the way of providing a distraction for the Obama team? We just saw Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois, calling for a special election to take the power out of Rod Blagojevich's hands. Do you see Barack Obama as feeling the need to get out and comment on this or react to it in any way?
I think they may, because this is a story, of course, they want to be as far away from as possible, and yet they aren't. It's not just the fact of geography that they are from Illinois, but past associations as well. So what the Obama team doesn't want is a bunch of reporters digging into past history to see what, if any, relationship existed between Blagojevich and Obama. And there is some history there. A reporter for The New Yorker wrote a little bit about it. So it's clear that they'll want to put that distance between Blagojevich and Obama. It's already existing. I mean, this cloud has been over this governor for several years now. But what's so striking about this indictment, and it's something that Pat Fitzgerald underlined today, is the ongoing nature of this alleged criminal conduct. I mean, note, by the way, for the lawyers out there, this was not handed down in an indictment. This is not where a grand jury met and convened for days and days and prosecutors meticulously presented their evidence as they normally would. This is a criminal charge, a complaint that was unsealed yesterday. Maybe there will be an indictment moving forward, but did you notice in that news conference how Fitzgerald is actually openly soliciting more evidence, hoping people will come forward? This is not a case that is buttoned up, yet at the same time, there's no question they felt that they had compelling evidence and certainly probable cause to charge the case, but they're looking for more.
Fitzgerald Savannah explained why he decided to act now and not wait until, in his words, later on, let's say in March.
Well, he used a pretty striking metaphor. I mean, he said he wanted to stop a crime spree. And what he didn't want to do is be presented with a situation 3, 4, 5 months down the road, tie up the case in a neat little bow, as he says it, and then people would say, but boy, the damage has already been done. Under these corrupt conditions, a U.S. senator was appointed, and now you can't unring the bell. Fitzgerald said he felt compelled to act now to try to stop this. Now, note, of course, that the governor is still in power. He's presumed innocent. He still has the legal power to appoint a successor to Barack Obama. The political power, that's another question, and that's clearly what Pat Fitzgerald was driving at today.
But, Savannah, I tell you what, if he was casting out for more evidence today on the basis of what's in this complaint, it doesn't sound like he's going to have much difficulty finding it because it was so rife, so up to the moment, so much going on while Rod Blagojevich knew that he was under investigation by the U.S. attorney. It's really amazing, don't you think?
Yeah, I think a word that comes to mind is audacious. I think Fitzgerald may have even used that word in the news conference.
The audacity
and look,
of greed.
At the end of the, it boils down to a 2-count complaint. So there are just 2 charges here. And the press release that came along with it made the point that there's a lot of other conduct that federal prosecutors were looking at. So I would not be surprised at all if sometime down the road you do see an indictment and you do see conduct that reaches back months and years, and you see more charges in the offing. I would not be surprised to see that at all.
Savannah, thanks so much for joining us. I know you're going to stay on top of this story. And now on to the other developing story, the auto industry bailout. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid says Congress will act on the auto bailout as early as the end of today. Reid says there are just a few issues left to work out to get $15 billion into the hands of the big 3 auto companies. Meantime, this morning on Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi stressed this money is not a bailout.
I think the American people have to think of this not as a bailout, but as a last chance, a smaller amount of money than being requested by the industry for them to show that they can adapt, that they can restructure, that they can be viable, that they can innovate, and that they can be accountable.
David Sanger is chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times. He wrote a column on the bailout in today's edition. David, thanks so much for joining us. You talked about the risks associated with this for Washington. You mentioned 3 of them in particular. Why don't you run through them briefly?
Sure. The first risk, as with any bailout, is the risk that President-elect Obama referred to in his interview on Meet the Press on Sunday, and that is that governments just are not usually very good at managing big enterprises like this. In fact, the past 3 decades, John, have been all about attempts by many governments to get rid of national airlines or national car companies or national railroads and put these in the private sector. The second risk, of course, is that this doesn't work. I mean, you heard before Nancy Pelosi talking about how this was a chance for these companies to transform themselves. Well, we've been talking about these companies transforming themselves for 2 or 3 decades. The thought that they're going to do this in the duration of the $15 billion, which is to say an amount of money that would last a few weeks or months, is a little difficult to believe. And then the third risk is a risk that comes out of what we've been telling the rest of the world for years now. We have been going around the world saying our companies, American companies, have to be treated exactly the way a Japanese company would be treated in Japan or a French company would be treated in France. That is, you get national treatment if you're an investor in the country. And yet, in this case, we're doing this just for our American homegrown auto companies, not for those Japanese, German, other companies that have invested, built factories in the United States, and some of whom are being quite successful.
Well, David, we've got a lot of details, obviously, on this proposal, $15 billion, as you mentioned, that short-term loan. But the thing that's sticking out to a lot of people is this so-called car czar that will be appointed, interestingly enough, by the president, the current president. And Nancy Pelosi said earlier that she certainly hopes that once the administration changes, that they don't have to replace this person. That doesn't sound very confident in the process.
Well, first of all, the fact that we're discussing a car czar who would go beyond the term of President Bush, which is to say more than a little over a month here now, tells you that this $15 billion is just the first stage, and there's a lot more money and a lot more restructuring and a lot more government intervention to come. That is one way to go, to have a car czar, because somebody's got to make decisions. In this case, if you read the legislation, the role of the czar sounds a little bit like the role of a bankruptcy judge. The czar would get, for example, to decide on whether he would approve or veto any investment the companies would make over $25 million. Well, you can't really build an assembly line for $25 million. So basically, any significant business decision these companies would make, what kind of new cars they would invest in, where they're going to build factories, where they're going to close factories, would all fall under this czar, who would essentially become the replacement for the board of directors.
And David, that bankruptcy idea, of course, is exactly what many Republicans want. This may be the price of getting Republican and White House support. David Sanger, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Now, coming up after the break, we'll talk live to Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn. She sits on the House Financial Services Committee concerning the bailout. And still ahead, the stories that are fit to print in the New York Times, including the reason why babies who are Scorpios, like me, are more prone to a certain illness.
And we've got much more on the arrest. The real shocker today, the allegations of big-time corruption involving the governor of Illinois. His bond hearing is within this hour. It's coming up. We're going to tell you about the political implications as the new government, the Obama administration, gets ready to take over Washington. You're watching the New York Times Transition Edition, only on MSNBC.
I got here 4 years ago. A lot of you were in the audience, asked me the question of whether or not Illinois is the most corrupt state in the United States. And I didn't answer that question, yes or no. And I can't answer that question today. I don't have 49 other states to compare it with. But I can tell you one thing. If it isn't the most corrupt state in the United States, it's certainly one hell of a competitor.
We, of course, are following breaking news out of Chicago right now. You see Chicago Mayor Richard Daley speaking, and as soon as he starts to talk about the big news of the day, the arrest of the Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich on several charges, including, according to authorities, the attempt to sell or trade the Senate seat being vacated by Barack Obama. We'll bring Mayor Daley's comments to you.
Welcome back to the New York Times Transition Edition on MSNBC.
And we're continuing to follow that news breaking today that Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich has, in fact, been arrested for allegedly trying to benefit financially from filling that seat to soon be vacated by Obama. And if Blagojevich does go to prison and President Bush does not commute the sentence of former Governor George Ryan, that would mean there would be 2 Illinois governors in jail at the same time. And Blagojevich would also become, startlingly, the 4th Illinois governor to go to prison in 35 years.
Dubious record.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. We want to talk to you about the auto industry bailout in just a moment, but first, Congresswoman, your reaction to the arrest of the governor and this incredible array of allegations today.
Yes, it is, and it is something that I think everyone is watching. It is with great sadness that we hear this news today, and I think also with a sense of disappointment and a sense of concern for the people of Illinois and for the elected officials that are serving there.
Do you like the idea that Senator Durbin has suggested of going to a special election rather than have this governor under a cloud, so long as he's in office, have the power to make that appointment?
Yeah, John, I think that one of the things I heard Senator Durbin's comments, and I think that this is one of the things we need to let those in Illinois decide how they want to approach this and then see what all else is on the table. I think that they all probably know a little bit more at this point than those of us who represent other states do.
And Congresswoman, I want to talk to you about the auto bailout. So much going on today, but where do you stand on this? I know you've been on the fence about it. You were also opposed to that $700 billion bailout for Wall Street. They've got the car czar as a part of the proposal, protections in place for taxpayers. You got the golden parachutes ended. Where do you feel about this? Where do you stand?
What I think is that what we still need to do is see those components of reorganization. I continue to believe moving to some type modified Chapter 11, where they have to go in and renegotiate these contracts, go through restructuring, go through reorganization, go through and reposition that debt. There's a lot to be done. The UAW, labor needs to make some concessions. And what we want to do is say, how do we get to a long-term viable, healthy auto manufacturing, domestic auto manufacturing industry in this country?
But right now with this proposal, you're not happy with what's on the table right now?
You know, I am not. I don't think that there is enough of the steps that need to be made on reorganization, restructuring, renegotiation. There is more work that needs to be done.
So is your stance right now simply that they need to file for bankruptcy? Is that what would make you satisfied? I don't want to use the word happy because no one's happy here, but do you think that's the best course?
You know, my concern is that they do need to move to some type modified Chapter 11. And look at that not as bankruptcy, but look at that as the opportunity to restructure and reorganize and get healthy. You know, it's the same thing as with someone who says, I'm not living a healthy lifestyle. I need to get on an exercise regimen, and I need to get on a diet, and I'm going to push myself into a program that's going to put me on a pathway to health.
But
what we need the auto industry to do is that same thing. And we've seen it with the airlines. You can look at United and Delta. Moving to Chapter 11 allowed them to stay in business, to continue working, and then to be able to move themselves toward health and better bottom lines.
Congresswoman, plainly the industry doesn't want to go through bankruptcy. The White House is participating with Democratic leaders who also don't want them to go through bankruptcy. Isn't the reality that if they do, in fact, reach an agreement, which they seem optimistic about doing today, that they do have the votes, even though some conservatives and Republicans like you are going to be opposed to it, that they're going to have the votes to pass this thing?
Well, I think that, John, what you would see is individuals on both sides of the aisle. And we've talked a good bit about this. It's not necessarily a partisan issue. You're not going to see a vote divide on a partisan issue. It is more of a philosophical issue. Tell me the last time you saw government come in and micromanage an industry and that industry become more productive and healthier. And you don't have a track record that you can point to and say, well, there's an industry. Here is a great example of that. What we're saying is let's have the auto industry take the lead. Let's work with them and have government become the reinsurer or guarantor of last resort rather than the resource of first resort. And I think on that philosophical divide is where the votes are going to separate.
Well, we'll see what happens. People I talked to in the White House and on the Hill believe it will pass. But, of course, we'll see what happens later this week. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And still ahead, the New York Times Transition Edition. Could there be trouble in President-elect Barack Obama's foreign policy team of rivals? We're going to tell you what's going on between incoming Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and UN envoy Susan Rice.
Plus, NBC makes a big decision about the future of primetime on this network, and it all revolves around comedian Jay Leno. The stories in the New York Times.
We are thrilled to officially announce once and for all that Jay Leno will be staying with the NBC family and will be joining us starting in the fall of 2009 on a 5-night-a-week, 10 p.m. 10 p.m. primetime entertainment show.
What?
Okay, Jay's not walking, as you just heard there. Jay Leno will be staying with NBC to host that primetime show weeknights, 10 p.m., already promoting it.
Very good. Bill Carter wrote about this in today's New York Times. Bill, let me ask you, our colleague Courtney Hazlett said this morning on MSNBC that the significance of this deal is that scripted programming in the 10 p.m. hour on major television networks is now dead. You agree with that?
Well, I don't know if it's dead, because I think the other networks will probably try to counter-program with drama, because that's what they don't have a star like Jay Leno to put in. But I think this does move the economic needle quite a bit. You know, they're going to be able to save a tremendous amount of money on this show. It only has to do kind of a marginal rating for the NBC to have a gigantic bonanza here, because basically one Jay Leno week will be less than a single episode of a drama in terms of cost. So there's a tremendous advantage for NBC, assuming this works.
Well, you know, Bill, so many people were said to be salivating to get Jay Leno, and in fact, in this press conference, he said that the rumor of him going to ABC was started by a disgruntled employee himself.
Himself, yeah. Yeah, and I believe the deal with ABC was all but official. I mean, he couldn't make it official because he was under contract. But there was definitely a movement in place that if NBC had not come up with this, he would have gone to ABC and competed against Conan O'Brien in The Tonight Show, which would have been a very bad situation for NBC. So they staved that off in addition.
Bill, one quick question before we let you go. Is your sense of the thing that Leno can draw numbers that will compete with those scripted dramas, or the savings so great that he only has to draw, you know, some fraction of what those other shows draw?
Well, two things. He certainly can't draw what the best dramas draw, because he's not really going to be close to that, I don't think. But here's the advantage he has. He'll do 46 or 48 weeks of original programming. They only do 22 weeks. So in the middle of June and July and August, when they're in repeats and doing no ratings at all, he'll still be on giving NBC a very good performance. So it'll work out for them. They're going to be ahead even if he's doing half the number that the dramas are doing.
Wow.
Does indeed sound like a win-win for everybody. Bill Carter, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
Now, still ahead, more on the big story breaking today. Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich under arrest for corruption charges. Among the accusations, he tried to sell off the Senate seat left vacant by Barack Obama.
And we'll go live to Chicago, where a sit-in at a factory enters its 5th day. Workers claiming they will not leave until they get assurances that they will receive severance and vacation pay they say they're owed. This is the New York Times Transition Edition, only on MSNBC.
Well, if it's true, it's a very, very sad comment, because the selection of the U.S. Senator is vitally important to the future of this state and in this country. And if it's true, it's a very, very sad day and very sad comment.
It also alleges that he shut down the Chicago Tribune and threatened to hold state funding for Wrigley Field if they didn't remove.
You would have to ask those people at the
Tribune. From the editorial board.
You would have to ask the Tribune that. I wouldn't know. But you have to ask them. No, but you have to ask the Tribune. Interview them as quickly as possible.
What does it say about Illinois that now we've got one governor in jail, we've got another sitting governor who just got arrested?
Well, it's just it's an individual. It's a sad comment about any profession or any family. It's an individual, but doesn't reflect upon all politics or anyone. I've been involved in politics all my life. I'm very proud of it, and people are too. You know, it's something that takes place.
Mayor John Harris was also.
Of course, that was Chicago Mayor Richard Daley on tape reacting to the stunning news today about Governor Rod Blagojevich under arrest for corruption charges. Welcome back to the New York Times Transition Edition on MSNBC. I'm John Harwood of the New York Times and CNBC.
And I'm Tamryn Hall of MSNBC. And just when President-elect Obama was gathering bipartisan accolades for his cabinet appointments, the governor of his home state of Illinois arrested on some startling corruption charges. And does this open open the door for Republicans to restart their anti-democratic engines at the very moment that he needs them the most. Peter Baker is Washington correspondent for the New York Times. And Peter, as we heard in the press conference from the U.S. Attorney there's no indication or any implication of Barack Obama in these shocking charges. But nonetheless, some are wondering what this will do to his future, especially when the Republicans are watching. And you already have the Republican governors of the country calling on Blagojevich to resign.
Well, you certainly don't want, before you've even been inaugurated, to have the very first scandal of your administration distract you at a time when you're already trying to deal with an economic crisis and you've got the Mumbai bombings and everything else showing what a huge plate awaits this next president. And as you said, there's no implication so far that anybody around Obama himself had any involvement in this, but it's just one more question that they're going to have to answer over these next few days. Who knew what when, what was discussed in terms of this Senate seat, and it creates an impression of a culture of politics that this next president emerges from in the state of Illinois that people are going to take shots at and ask questions about.
Peter, so far as I've seen so far, no comment from any Obama aides about this. We'll see if he gets a question in the pool spray in that meeting with Al Gore today. But would you expect that Barack Obama will feel the need to step up, perhaps on Senator Durbin's call that he made earlier today, for a special election to take the power of appointment out of the hands of the governor while he's under this cloud?
I mean, that would certainly be a logical assumption that he might do something like that. As you said, the sole power in Illinois law is for the governor at this moment to make that appointment. That's something that seems untenable given the current circumstances, but that would require an act of the state legislature, and so President-elect Obama would certainly be asked to weigh in what he thinks about that. It's hard to imagine any senator going to Washington filling that seat right now, through any other means.
And Peter, I want to talk to you about some other things affecting the transition, particularly the auto bailout. In our own first read on MSNBC, the political team points out that the president has been far from lame when it comes to this bailout, taking control perhaps of the direction that the selection of the auto czar, the car czar as they're calling it, and being influential in some of the terms of this proposed auto bailout. How is Obama's transition handling this delicate situation? Again, as he points out, we have one president at a time, but this auto bailout thing is something he has said he wanted. In fact, he brought it up in their first meeting.
Well, that's right, exactly. It's a very awkward and difficult moment for him because he's not president of the United States, but he's going to have to live with the decisions that are made right now. So, of course, he's trying to be involved as much as he can. His top aides are on the Hill talking with members of Congress up there. There is a desire that this car czar, or whatever you want to call him, that will be appointed by President Bush would be somebody that would be acceptable to President-elect Obama as well, because otherwise it makes no sense to appoint somebody for literally 40 days or 45 days who would do that job. So, it's an odd moment, but it's one that sort of requires an active partnership almost between President Bush and President-elect Obama.
Well, Peter, have you heard anything specifically on that partnership? Because we just got a wire story coming across, quoting Barney Frank as saying he didn't think it would be so problematic to have a car czar appointed and then perhaps replaced later by Barack Obama, which I didn't know if that is a signal that perhaps there isn't going to be comedy on that choice. But what are you hearing about that?
Well, I hadn't heard that comment, but that would certainly make it that much more difficult to appoint somebody right now. Who would take that job knowing he was not guaranteed or she was not guaranteed of keeping it in just 40-some days? It would make no sense. So, to have somebody come in with genuine power to oversee the situation and to perhaps step in after March 31st if the plans that the auto industry put forward aren't sufficient, you'd want somebody of sufficient stature to come in and do that, and then somebody with sufficient stature isn't going to do it on those kind of terms, you would think.
You would think. A lot of surprises in this transition. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's day 5 of a sit-in at a closed Chicago factory where laid-off union workers are refusing to leave until the plants reopen or they receive severance pay and accrued vacation time they say they're owed. The factory closed last week after Bank of America canceled the company's financing, and the state of Illinois has suspended all business with the bank. NBC's Kevin Tibbles is live in Chicago. Kevin, Governor Blagojevich, who was arrested this morning, had been involved in the talks on that dispute. What's the status of it right now?
Well, indeed, Governor Blagojevich was right here yesterday, along with Senator Dick Durbin and several other politicians, Mr. Gutierrez as well. And essentially, the governor said that he was going to pull all dealings with the Bank of America from the state of Illinois because of the situation here, although there does seem to be some dispute as to actually who is really responsible for the fact that the Republic Windows and Doors has shut down so hastily, leaving some 250 to 300 workers out of luck, essentially. They are so far not receiving any severance or vacation pay, which is generally appropriated to them by law. There is also some question as to whether or not this company has simply changed names and is moving to next door to Iowa. But at this moment in time, there are 3 shifts working at this plant. And when I say working, their job is essentially to come here and continue this sit-in which is going on. There are union members coming from other unions traveling into town to show support here. And as I speak, at about 1 o'clock local time today, a meeting between the company, the workers, and the Bank of America has started taking place at the Bank of America building downtown. The company says the Bank of America pulled their funding. The Bank of America says they don't have any right to tell the company what to do with the money that they've lent it. And, of course, the workers are saying, well, what about us? It's almost Christmas time and we're out of work and we've got no severance pay.
But quickly, Kevin, can you tell us how long can they stay there? This is a sit-in, but in the end, this property, this factory belongs to someone, and it is not the workers, even though they've put their sweat into making it.
Well, it's interesting because there has been a lot of talk about how symbolic this particular sit-in. When you talk about, 500,800,000 jobs being lost in this country over a very short period of time, you would think that 250 to 300 jobs may just be a drop in the bucket. But, a Republican Windows and Doors has become a symbol for what is taking place right across this country. I think it's become fairly obvious with the number of union leaders who have actually flown into this city to show solidarity with these workers here, that the people on the workers' side at least want to continue to turn this place into a symbol for what is going on with the nation's economy. The workers, of course, are being allowed to remain inside. They are not being charged with trespassing, but it is, I think, important for me to point out that they are not allowing anyone else onto the property. Only the workers who are employed here are being allowed inside with their union representatives, and the situation has remained very calm and very orderly up until this point. Should that change in a few days' time or a few weeks down the road, who's to say what could take place here? But food is being delivered, coffee, hot drinks, and the like are being delivered. So far, they are being allowed to stay.
We will leave it there. Kevin Tibbles, thanks so much for joining us. Tamryn, it's remarkable the way the state you know so well has become the vortex for politics, economics, and now corruption today in the
Quite a combination, John. Yeah. Quite a combination. Well, the governor of Illinois, back to what's happening in that state, under arrest, accused of being involved in pay-to-play schemes. It is the big story breaking.
We'll get the details from political reporter Jeff Zeleny up next. You're watching the New York Times Transition Edition on MSNBC.
Just a short time ago, Illinois Senator Dick Durbin spoke with reporters today and was asked about the possibility of Governor Rod Blagojevich still being able to name a successor to Barack Obama in the Senate. And he is saying, John, as you well know, that a special election is needed. He says, and his quote was, "I think it's the only way out at this point."
Let's bring in Jeff Zeleny, a political reporter for the New York Times. Jeff, what do you think? Will that suggestion fly of having a special election to try to take this power out of Rod Blagojevich's hands?
Well, if Senator Durbin is suggesting it, there's a good likelihood that President-elect Barack Obama also thinks the same thing. These two men have been working in concert for many years, and they are the leaders of the Illinois Democratic Party now, no question about it. The Illinois legislature, though, will probably also like to have some say in this. A very powerful Democrat in Illinois is House Speaker Mike Madigan. He served in Springfield and really reigned over Springfield for years, so I think this is still being sorted out. But it'll be interesting to see what President-elect Obama says when he makes his first remarks about that this afternoon.
Well, Jeff, Congresswoman Jen Schakowsky, whom we spoke with earlier about this, is now saying that Rod Blagojevich should, in fact, resign. Just one of the many that are now saying this. But back to Senator Durbin, and he's saying that no appointment could produce a credible replacement. A lot of people have openly courted for this job, including, for example, Jesse Jackson Jr., who, again, not tied to any of these allegations that are out there. But how do you move forward, and how is the person who is eventually appointed protected?
There's no question that moving forward, in this case, really time is of the essence. If the Senate is going to get the stimulus package passed, all these things passed we've been talking about for weeks and weeks, they need a full Senate. So there's no question they have to move forward. But right now, things are being sorted out. I think we will hear from, all eyes are on Illinois, we will hear from people in Springfield, the legislative leaders, the Senate president, the House Speaker, and see where this goes. But look for what President-elect Obama is going to say about this. He has tried to stay out of this. Of course, his advisors said he's been not pushing anyone, but he has had an estranged relationship from a Governor Blagojevich for quite some time, and partly because of this. Everyone in Illinois knew that Governor Blagojevich was under investigation, so they've been staying away from this. We'll see now how much he weighs in, how much he wants the full Senate to be seated when he is sworn into office in January.
Well, and Jeff, this is only one of these Senate appointment decisions that is on the plate of the nation's political system. Governor Patterson here in New York, of course, has a decision to make. And Caroline Kennedy, who played a prominent role in Barack Obama's campaign, now being supported, our colleagues report this morning, by her uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy, who also played a prominent role in Obama's campaign. What do you think Barack Obama is doing or not doing in the case of the New York situation to respond to this now that Caroline Kennedy seems to be a viable contender for this?
Well, John, there's no question that the makeup of the Senate is changing incredibly since Election Day, and will be quite different in January. But we're told that President-elect Obama is also staying out of this. We're told he has offered his advice and is available to answer questions from Caroline Kennedy if she has questions about what it's like to be a senator. But he is not weighing into the decision of the New York governor. But there's no question that if Caroline Kennedy would come into the Senate, she would be a chief ally of President-elect Obama's. They really became close friends during the campaign. Before he ran for president, they didn't know each other at all. So they become they are contemporaries and they're friends. But Mr. Obama is offering advice, we're told, but is not pushing her, because this is a decision that she has to make and the governor of New York has to make as well.
Jeff, real quick, though, before we let you go here, I've got to ask you about the Susan Rice, Hillary Clinton storyline. We're hearing that there may be some friction between these two very powerful figures. What are you hearing about this before we let you go?
I think we're going to be hearing a lot of reports of potential friction of this and that. Certainly, a lot of differences were aired during the campaign. My guess is it's not going to be all sunshine and light from here forward, but that's not the story of the day. So I think that is sort of to the back burner. We'll see how it plays out once the cabinet convenes and they're sworn in.
To be continued.
We'll leave it there. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. My suspicion is that Susan Rice and Hillary Clinton can get over whatever tension exists. And on that other story, I got to think that for Governor David Patterson, it's awfully hard to disentangle the Obama factor when he's thinking about Caroline Kennedy.
It's still fascinating, though, that he says that he's not even sure if Caroline Kennedy wants the job, because when they spoke, she didn't directly bring it up to him. So, again, to be continued on so many stories.
He'll figure it out sooner or later.
For sure.
You might remember this next story. The out-of-work banker who stood on New York City street corners handing out his resume.
Well, listen to this one. His unusual way of trying to land a job. Boy, oh boy, it's paid off in this tough economic climate. We're going to talk to him and the man who actually hired him. Maybe others can pick up a tip here.
Absolutely. Let's face it, it's a rough time. We want to bring you some good news whenever we can in this economy. It's estimated 1.9 million Americans have lost jobs since the start of the recession, 533,000 just last month. Our next guest used a unique strategy to get hired after a year on the unemployment list.
Yeah, this is a great story. Joshua Persky was the out-of-work banker who stood on the New York street corner this summer. He actually handed out resumes to passersby, and the best part of all, he wore a sign that read, "Experienced MIT grad for hire." He was recently, hired as a senior manager doing valuation work for a large accounting firm in New York. And Elliot Ogunlik is Joshua's new supervisor. They're both in studio. So, Joshua, we know your story. You stood out on the sign. I want to know about the guy who hired you. I mean, how did you decide this is a smart guy, I can hire him, and not a gimmick and get caught up in the whole media hype of what was happening here?
Well, obviously, Joshua came from, reputable sources, an executive recruit firm, but having the MIT degree, having the background at Houlihan Lokey and Fortis Capital, he was like a recipe for us. He's like a hidden treasure. And we were looking for this type of talent to really exploit and grow our firm and our group. And we're very pleased to have him.
It's great that you were hiring in this time when so many people are not.
Well, we're very fortunate because of the business model our group has created. It's a real growth opportunity because of the space that we play in, and Josh is a perfect fit. He's very analytical, personable, and he has great business sense, which is very important to me.
Josh, how did you deal with the embarrassment factor? A lot of people, when they have something bad happen to them in their work life, they're ashamed of it. They're concerned about what their friends and what their family might think. How did you deal with that part of standing out there with that sign?
Well, I just decided that it was more important to do whatever I could to find a job and not take any ego or embarrassment into consideration. So my wife was very encouraging, our friends were encouraging, and everyone I spoke to beforehand thought it was a great idea. And once I was out, the response in the street was so positive that just kept me going.
Well, you can't be a wallflower and be willing to go on the street of New York with a sign. So there's got to be some part of you that shows that you're the aggressive go-getter. But when you look at the numbers, Joshua, 1.9 million, as John pointed out of work, you have to know how lucky you are in this climate. From looking back at the situation, really, is it about trying to stand out in maybe the craziest of ways to be able to take care of yourself and your family?
Yeah, I think for me, it was bad timing last year. I was one of the first people to lose their jobs. Maybe now I'm one of the first people to get back into the market, and it's a sign of good things to come, and the market's starting to turn around. I hope 2009 brings us a better year.
Well, Elliot, speaking of that, you had Barack Obama over the weekend saying this economy is going to get worse before it gets better. What is your sense of that? Are we near a bottom, or have we got a long way to go?
I think it's tough to pick a bottom in any environment or any economy. I think everybody should just fasten their seatbelts. We have a new good administration coming in. I think the new president is surrounding himself with the right advisors, and we're all hoping for the best. We're looking for good things to come.
Well, Josh, you can come up with a book, Advice on How to Land a Job in a Tough Market, because you were able to do so. Congratulations.
Excellent story.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
We want to bring you quickly breaking news. We just got in out of Chicago. The governor of Illinois, Blagojevich, has just been given bond $4,500. He had a court appearance within this hour. As you well know, he faces a number of charges, including allegations that he tried to sell or even trade the Senate seat to be vacated by Barack Obama, and we'll keep you up to date on what's happening with his case.
And that brings us to the end of another New York Times Transition Edition on MSNBC.